All right. Hello, everybody. I hope you all are doing well. This is the NBA Tournament Strategy Show where we look at last night's slate. We go game by game, look at today's slate, talk about guys we like, guys we want to think about more so for the pre-lock show. On the pre-lock show, which is for VIP members only at 5:30 p.m. Eastern, we talk about leverage plays, core plays, how we're utilizing the domination station that night. Uh, and go from there. So yeah, it's usually a pretty good time. Recommend checking that out if you can. Feel free to use the promo code BOB for a 10% discount if you're interested. All right, now let's look at last night's slate. Not a great one for me, to be honest. It's weird because we had quite a few of these pieces, but I was a little too heavy on guys who just really didn't come through, like Tim Hardaway Jr. and I'm sure there are other guys too. Killian Hayes kind of disappointed towards the end. Chris Duarte. There are a few kind of lackluster guys in there. But looking at the winning lineups, Trae Young. Trae Young was a guy that I was pretty indifferent to, per usual. Domination Station ended up giving me a little bit more exposure on the last run. So I was probably in that like 15 to 25% range. I don't recall exactly. He had a strong night once again. He's been in great form. So shout out to Trae Young. Jaden Hardy was a core play. Everyone knew to play Jaden Hardy, so he wasn't really a surprise, but glad that panned out. Kyle Anderson, the domination station, liked a good bit. I think we were slightly over the field on him, but I didn't force that. That was a pure domination station play. So love it when that happens. I talked about it yesterday. Kyle Anderson will never be a core play for me, but he's been in such good form that I'm okay being above field weight to him these days. Eugene was almost a core play for us. For those of you that were watching the pre-lock show yesterday, on like our second or our first run, Eugene was a core play, but then with some of the news that came out, unfortunately, we ended up swapping Tim Hardaway Jr. for Eugene. Definitely didn't pan out the way we would have liked it to, but at least we were well over the field on Eugene, and so that definitely helped make last night a little bit better. Isaiah Jackson was a core play. He really wasn't fantastic, but he did enough to make the 100K winning lineup. Kevin Porter Jr. Had a fantastic night. This game was able to stay close, which is always funny. I feel like Houston's been doing that a good bit lately, which is just wild. Cool. Anthony Edwards was a B-dubs, again, one of DFS Army's coaches, leverage play, so glad that worked out for him. We were also over the field on Anthony Edwards, so overall solid performance. James Wiseman was someone that the domination station gave us some exposure to, but I don't think we're over the field on him. So all in all, there weren't really any major surprises here. I don't think there's anyone who was super low owned, but just didn't get the right mix. Happens sometimes. Moving on. Let's look at tonight's slate. That's what really matters here. Clint Wood, good to see you too, man. Good to see you. Peter, I see words, but to be honest, I can't really tell what that means. But I think there's a lot of good emojis you're using there. Awesome. All right, Thomas Dye, good to see you, man. Thank you for joining. All right, guys, let's jump in. The other thing about last night too is that before that blowout, I was feeling fantastic. The guys were crushing. Killian Hayes was crushing. But then they really started to slow down once the game started blowing out, which was disappointing to see. But again, it happens. It's the way DFS works. If it was super easy, it would be boring. But winning's always fun too. So let's jump into it. The Cavs, we have some interesting news and some interesting pieces today. Jared Allen's out, which automatically just makes this game more interesting and more exciting for me. The guys who have had the highest increase in usage when Jared Allen is out is a little surprising, to be honest. Is Darius Garland and Ricky Rubio, which is fine. Like I the Hornets are bad against everyone, so you could really tell me anyone sees a boost against with someone out, and they're also playing the Hornets, and I'm automatically more interested in them. So I like Rubio's a solid value play on this slate, especially with the increasing usage he sees. Not a guy who's going to be a core player or anything like that for me. He's still not going to start here tonight. So he's still going to need to be very efficient, but that's slightly more likely with Jared Allen out. And then, like I said, Garland sees the highest increasing usage. The spot's already a plus matchup for him. So he's just another viable play for me on this slate against a really bad team. I want exposure to these Cavaliers tonight, and I like having Garland to help me do that. You guys know I love playing bigs against Charlotte. Evan Mobley doesn't really see an increase in usage with Allen out, but he is in a fantastic matchup, a fantastic spot. Unfortunately, he's looking like he's going to be really popular on this slate, so I doubt I'll be able to make him like a leverage play like bigs usually are for me, but he's someone that I want to make sure I at least have some exposure to, and I'll be happy being above field weight. Clint Wood said, I had a plan to play Giannis in my 20 entry, but should have played him in my single entry contest too. Broke even. We ready to go today? Agreed, man. Nice, though. Nice. It's always like those it's always like one or two pivots, but when you get that right, that's when you are really in a good spot. Nice, David. Appreciate it. Glad you're able to make it today, man. Dave, good to see you, man. And agreed. Hit the like button, share, and subscribe. Always appreciate you all for that. Peter said second place in the 7,500 on DK. Nice, man. Freaking awesome. Love seeing the success. I think that explains the emojis. Congrats, man. Jamar said Kuzma's out. That makes this slate a lot easier too. If yeah, well, I still have him. Let me go on Twitter and see. Yeah, Kuzma's ruled out. Thanks, man. Good catch. Good catch. We'll get to that game. That one's a little bit more spicy too. But yeah, I like the Cavs tonight. I think Donovan Mitchell is on my radar as a potential sneaky leverage play. Again, fantastic matchup, and he's just going a little bit under-owned in my opinion. I really like this spot for the Cavs. I do have a little bit of concern here just because the spread is a little wide and also the game total isn't the highest. So I do really like this game and want to have multiple pieces from it. Stevens is looking like a solid value option on this slate. He is a very low usage guy, so the more popular he is, the less I like him. But again, we as of right now, I think he's a solid option, but not someone I want to go above field weight on. At least not by a lot. Maybe I'd be comfortable with like 40, 50, but I'm not trying to force a leverage play and make him like around 60%. I like him, but I don't trust him. So yeah, I like these guys. We spent a lot of time on them, but I think there's a lot of good plays from Cleveland tonight. And then things don't really get any more boring when it comes to the Hornets. I mean, there's a bit of a drop off, actually, for being honest. There's a bit of a drop off. But LaMelo Ball is still out for this team. Mark Williams is still out for this team. Cody Martin's out. Kelly Oubre is probable. So that makes plays like Dennis Smith Jr. a little bit more boring. Terry Rozier at 8,300. Some model doesn't love him, but it's not screaming no. Matchup isn't my favorite, but the low ownership does stand out. Hard to really take a shot here. Nick Richards is really the only guy who's popping because he sees more consistent minutes with Mark Williams out. He's a pretty solid producer too, and the ownership follows. So Hornets are a little bit boring tonight. They're in a tough matchup, tough spot. But if you think this game stays close, I'm totally fine taking shots on Rozier, maybe Hayward to a lesser degree. But it's looking not very likely that I'll have a ton of exposure to this team outside of close to matching the field on Richards. Richards should be starting here too, which is interesting. All right, next up we have the Pistons. You know, we can't have enough of the Pistons. Almost as bad as the Magic these days. This game is really just going to depend like how much exposure I get to this game is going to be impacted by if Jaden Ivey plays, if Bagley plays, if Burke plays, if Livers plays. Those four are listed as TBD outside of Bagley, who's already listed as unlikely to play. For those of you that don't remember, Isaiah Stewart has been out for a while, Bogdanović has been out for a while, and Diallo has been out for a while. So A lot of injury pieces moving here. Assuming Bagley doesn't play, then that does make Wiseman and Duran slightly more viable once again on this slate. They're priced up and they're getting more expensive, so they're no longer the extreme value that they were at earlier in the season. But still, in my mind, viable plays, especially if Bagley ends up getting ruled out. If I had to pick one, I would still prefer Wiseman. But to be honest with you guys, I think we're going to have better center options on the slate. So it's going to be hard to take shots on these guys. But I do think there's still viable tournament plays, but not guys I'm super excited about. Killian Hayes was playing freaking fantastic yesterday, but the blowout did hurt him a good bit. I think that's why we saw Corey Joseph have a little bit more of a ceiling performance. I think he benefited in some of the blowout run there. I mean, look at the spread. It's a 12-point spread. You can make a case that same thing could happen again tonight. So I think that does make a guy like Corey Joseph a little bit more viable. But with Eugene and Rodney McGruder and RJ Hampton all still being in the 3K range, again, if Ivy and Burks are out once again, I'm totally fine going right back to the well here. Preferred play that I feel is the safest is Killian Hayes. Outside of that, my guy Eugene is no longer low owned, so I'm fine being around field weight to him. I doubt I'll have like much more. But Rodney McGruder at 16%, I'm fine being over the field on him, and then having a little bit of RJ Hampton too won't hurt me too much. So again, another game that I'll have a decent amount of exposure to, but mostly just because of the value options available. So yeah, these first two games on the slate, this is where we're getting a lot of the value, at least early on. Zolo, what's up, man? Good to see you. For the Wizards, the biggest thing here is my guy Kyle Kuzma is out, which I wonder if that will impact the spread much. I mean, the Wizards are still better than the Pistons without him, so probably shouldn't. But Bradley Beal he was already a solid play. He's still in the 8K range, which is still too cheap for the upside he's been having here recently. The matchup against the Pistons is not scary at all. 18%, I think that's going to increase now that Kyle Kuzma's out. But if he's still in like that 20% range, he's still on my radar as a leverage play. Putting a 40-50% min on him is something that I'm definitely willing to do. If the domination station doesn't already just love him a ton anyway. Outside of that, Kristaps Porzingis benefits a lot when Kyle Kuzma's out, so he's definitely someone that I plan on having a lot of exposure to. Again, the center position is filled with a lot of strong plays, so I doubt I'm gonna force it if it doesn't happen naturally, but he's someone that I do want exposure to tonight. Outside of Beal, who sees a 6% increase in usage, other guys who benefit with Kuzma being out are guys like Monty Morris, who had a solid night on Friday, and Denny Avdija. They both see a slight boost increase in usage, so that makes them slightly more viable on this slate. I'm fine with them, but I'm not really trying to force exposure to anyone outside of Beal here. Oh yeah, okay. David said Killian Hayes also hurt his ankle. He came back, but was hobbling a bit. Yeah, I'm glad he was able to get the double-double, I think. So I'm glad he came back, but I'm fine going back to him again here. Rez, morning. Hope everything's going well for you, man. All right. So yeah, Wizards first two games are very interesting to me. Like Monty Morris, Avdija, Beal, Porzingis, all on my radar. The other pieces here, like Wright and Gafford, I'm not super excited about. But if I get some, I get some. And that's me just saying, like, if the domination station gives me some exposure, and as long as it's not too much, I'm not overly concerned about it. The Nuggets, another interesting one. This one's big because of Jamal Murray. Jamal Murray is listed as questionable. We have seen the impact that these Nuggets guys have when they're out. We're not exactly sure who's going to start between like Jackson and Brown. Like if I had to guess, I would assume it's probably Bruce Brown, but we can't be certain. But Jamal Murray being out is a boost to Reggie Jackson either way, if he starts or doesn't start. Bruce Brown, a boost to him. I will automatically put at least a 5% min on Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter Jr., and Nikola Jokic if Jamal Murray ends up being out. They all see an increase in usage. And I am just more interested in having exposure to those guys when Jamal Murray misses games. Outside of that, Jokic at 8 to 10% ownership, he's automatically going to be a leverage play for me. It's just low owned Jokic for me is always a no brainer. Usually he's low owned because it's a relatively tough matchup against the Raptors. That's true. And also, um, he tends to be lesser owned when we don't have a ton of value, which is also true on this slate. We have value options, but it's just not plentiful like we have on some slates. But with that being said, Nikola Jokic is still going to be a leverage play for me. This went pretty well for us on Friday, so hopefully it continues. And yeah, if Jamal Murray ends up being out, then Aaron Gordon, MPJ, Bruce Brown will all get a boost for me. Reggie Jackson to some extent as well, but to a lesser degree. But I like all of them. Next up, we have another team that I always love, and it's the Raptors. Man, I feel like no one ever plays Jakob Poeltl, but 9 times out of 10, he works out well for us. He is more expensive than he was, but I still feel like he's too cheap here. The matchup against Jokic is never one that I like to target. You know what? You know what's not talked about enough? Jokic. Like everyone gives him such a hard time for being an MVP player, but he always plays. Like when was the last time you saw Nikola Jokic questionable? Like you can't say that about any other stud. Anyway, just put some respect on the name. Is all I'm saying. Thomas Dye, you're right. KCP would see a boost too if Jamal Murray's out. KCP is honestly the guy that we shouldn't forget about. He's the one that I tend to forget about. But he's someone else that sees a boost. Not like a significant boost in usage or anything like that, but he just sees a boost. And for a guy like KCP, every little bit matters. As you can see, he's a relatively low points per minute guy, relatively low usage rate. So anytime he can do anything on the court, he can have a solid chance of breaking the slate. So I like the Nuggets a lot, but I'm still like being cautious with Bruce Brown, KCP, and Reggie Jackson just because that rotation is just a little weird for me right now. So I don't have like a great gut call on it, but I do trust like Gordon, Porter Jr., and Jokic. So I always feel that way. Zola, you're not wrong. Gordon always goes off when Murray doesn't play. And that's why, like, I just out of habit, I just increase exposure to Gordon, MPJ, and Jokic. That's pretty much all I do. And as long as that's good, it's good. Portal is always low owned because the center position is always stacked, but I don't care. Like Jakob Portal's playing 30 plus minutes now, and he's a pretty efficient player. He's involved from an offensive standpoint. I can't think of a reason to not be double the field on Jakob Portal. The matchup, like I said, is tough. I don't like to pick on Jokic very often, but I just feel like Jakob Portal's still too low owned here. It's really just an ownership play with the upside Jakob Portal brings to the table. He's just always going to be on my radar. And then finally, we have a guard I trust against the Nuggets. So Fred VanVleet gets on my radar for that reason too. Let me see something. Interesting. But yeah, Fred VanVleet and Jakob Poeltl are the main ways I want to go on this slate, considering Siakam, but not completely sold on him as a play yet. Next up, we have the Nets. Nets are boring, to be honest. Looks like they have a decent amount of exposure tonight. And the vast majority of that is just because they have a super soft matchup against the Thunder. Ben Simmons is out, but he's been out forever. Will probably always and forever be out. Who knows? But it's interesting, this Nets team. I've taken shots on Bridges. It works out sometimes. But it's like I said, when all these trades happened, there's going to be quite a few streaky shooters. This is a very much so like streaky team when it comes to their offensive performances. It's just going to be a different guy, give or take, every night. And you just have to kind of be okay with that. So to be honest, their ownership's not even low enough to take like a low shot on like a leverage play. But hopefully the domination station just gives me some exposure to these guys, like a nice mixture, because I don't really have a strong enough take on a guy that I want to force exposure to tonight. So hopefully we get a good mix. If we don't, I'll force a little. I'll make sure that I have exposure to at least Dinwiddie and a little bit of Cam Johnson. But ideally, I don't have to force it. Next up, we have the Oklahoma City Thunder. SGA is healthy. It's honestly all I care about. Kenrich Williams has been out for a while. Poku's out. Shet's been out for a while. None of that really matters. But they're healthy. They're facing a solid Nets team from a defensive standpoint. SGA has ownership. If he was lower owned, I would consider him as a potential leverage play, but that ownership just isn't something I'm trying to chase today. He's not super expensive. He's cheaper than he's been in a while, so that definitely makes him more viable. Totally fine getting exposure to him, but I'm not forcing exposure there tonight. For the Lakers, it's weird, guys. It's weird. LeBron James has been out, but D'Angelo Russell returning has really impacted Anthony Davis. He has not really had a fantastic ceiling performance since D'Angelo Russell has rejoined the starting lineup. With that being said, though, that's part of why Anthony Davis is lower owned now. 2 games, like 2 to 3 games, doesn't mean it's going to happen every game. So hopefully Anthony Davis gets his shit together and gets back on track. He will be a leverage play for me today as long as he stays around 10% ownership. I'll be double the field on him. LeBron James is still out. The matchup against the Pelicans isn't as tough as it used to be, but it's still not a super soft matchup, so there is some risk involved there. But Anthony Davis will be a leverage play for me without a doubt. No one else really stands out too much for me from this team. Like, you can make an argument for D'Angelo Russell. I don't hate it. If the domination station gives me some exposure, I'll live with it, but not trying to force it. Only person I'm forcing here is Anthony Davis. I remember Austin Reeves had a solid performance last time out, but not really something I'm trying to chase. For the Pelicans, what matters here, guys, is Brandon Ingram being questionable. We've seen it throughout this season. When Brandon Ingram's out, guys like Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, Josh Richardson, Najee Marshall all see a bit of a boost. Alongside, like, obviously, CJ McCollum and Joe Val see a nice increase in usage. But outside of, like, the obvious guys, it's those 4. And so I will have exposure. I think we're probably expecting... I would expect Josh Richardson to start if Brandon Ingram was ruled out, but I'm not certain, to be honest. So I would force exposure to whoever ends up starting. And that includes like Trey Murphy, Joe Val, and CJ. But whoever between Josh Richardson and Najee Marshall start, I'll boost my exposure to them. Herb Jones, he's starting, so I'll also force exposure to him if Brandon Ingram ends up getting ruled out. If Brandon Ingram plays, things get a little bit weirder. These guys aren't standing out too much for me. Brandon Ingram could be a little sneaky. CJ McCollum, Sim Model likes him a good bit in comparison to other people around him in his price range. But ultimately, a little hard for me to try and force too much exposure to these guys if everyone's healthy. I like the other games a bit more. If I feel like I'm not getting any Brandon Ingram or CJ McCollum, I'm willing to force it. But hopefully we just have that news in time and I don't have to worry about it too much. But we'll see. Moving on to the Magic. You guys know I don't like this team very much. But with Franz Wagner questionable, that could be a nice boost to Paolo Banchero. That could be a nice boost to... guys like Suggs and some of the other guys who could also see a benefit from just like a usage standpoint. But to be honest, I'm not super excited about it. It's really just if Franz Wagner's out, I'm more open to playing Paolo Banchero. Of course, this is a super soft matchup against a really bad Spurs team. So Wendell Carter Jr. is going to project pretty well here. He's also not very expensive. He's another chalky center play that I'm pretty much just kind of meh on. Ideally, the domination station will give me exposure around field weight, but then I'll still have my guys like AD and Jokic that I'm going over on. So hopefully it will just kind of balance all out. But I'm not forcing exposure to Carter today unless I'm just not getting any exposure. And then Fultz has been in solid form. He's another guy that if I just get exposure, I get it, but I'm not going to force it. So yeah, really Wendell Carter, Paolo Banchero if Franz Wagner ends up being out. The Spurs were a little bit of a surprise, I think, on Friday, was it? Keldon Johnson came out to play. I could be remembering this completely wrong. But Keldon Johnson's now questionable. Jeremy Sochan is questionable. Malachi Branham is out. Trey Jones is out. Romeo Langford is out. Kim Birch is out. That was a long list. But really the only news that was big is like Malachi Branham and Trey Jones being out. Of course, if Keldon Johnson and Jeremy Sochan actually end up not playing, again, they're currently listed as questionable, that would be a big deal. I like Devontae Graham here, especially if Keldon Johnson and Jeremy Sochan end up being out. I always like Graham when he's starting, which is something that we haven't seen a ton of, but I'm interested in seeing how they utilize him here tonight. So he's a guy who's on my radar. I wish he was lower owned, but unfortunately we can't have everything. Devin Vassell looked really good last time out. So he's another guy who would see a boost if Johnson or Sochan end up being out. But really, if Johnson and Sochan end up playing, the only guy that I'm really considering forcing exposure to is Devontae Graham. The other guys, I'm fine just getting some exposure naturally through the domination station, but I'm not going to force it. Next up for the Bucks, we have Chris Middleton listed as TBD. Joe Ingles is expected to play tonight. He didn't play last night. Giannis freaking crushed it last night. Went a little wild there. I'm not expecting that to happen again. This is a back-to-back for them. Back-to-back for the Suns too. So shouldn't matter too much. But to be honest, just ultimately, Giannis is a stud that if the domination station gives me some exposure, I'm fine with it, but I'm not trying to force it. The only way, Chris Middleton at 9,100, not even kind of a discount. Even if Chris Middleton ends up getting ruled out, like that's still a bit of a tough thing to stomach. That's tough. That's tough. Yeah, I don't love the Bucks too much tonight, to be honest. If Middleton ends up getting ruled out, then it definitely does make Holiday, Lopez, and Portis more viable, but still not guys I'm trying to take a shot on. They have a little bit too much depth for me to try to take shots on Allen or Connaughton or Crowder or Ingles these days. So probably going to avoid that, even if Chris Middleton ends up being out. But the top half, like Portis, Lopez, Holiday, are still semi-viable, but still might not be enough. We'll have to look into it if that actually happens. For the Suns, Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton and Josh Okogie disappointed me a little bit yesterday. I don't think any of them really came through. But I'm going right back to the well here. They're still low owned, which is what matters to me the absolute most. And I still think they have upside. So Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, and Okogie. The matchup's god-awful, though, for at least Booker and Okogie. We know the Bucks are a really good defense, but they do still allow a decent amount of three-point shooting. So as long as Devin Booker can get his shot falling, then he has a chance. Okogie, similar story. And then DeAndre Ayton has to really be efficient with his time out there against Giannis and crew. But I think they can do it. So there'll be leverage plays for me again tonight unless something crazy happens. But I don't really foresee that happening. And it's pretty easy, like a 10% min on Devin Booker. If he fails me tonight at low ownership, that 10% really shouldn't hurt me too much as long as everything else goes well. But if he crushes, I'll be in a fantastic spot. DeAndre Ayton might be a little bit tougher to make a leverage play, to be honest. 20% min on him. It might be a little bit hard to make happen since I already have Jokic and AD as leverage plays. So we'll have to feel this one out a little bit more, but I do like Ayton a lot. And then Okogie is similar to Devin Booker's super low ownership, so a 10% min won't hurt me too much, but will still help me a lot if they come through for me. So still like the spots for them. Next up, we have the Knicks. For the Knicks tonight, our guy Brunson's doubtful, which means we have a solid grip on how to play this out. Julius Randle sees a boost. Emmanuel Quickley sees a boost, but he's priced up at 7,100. There's other guards who are more of a value. I think Quickley's still playable here. Portland is a god-awful offense. So especially if Quickley's still going to be low owned, if we get the official news that Brunson's going to be out, then I'm open to having some shares of him. Not someone that I want to make a core player or anything like that, because he's not the same kind of value he was, but he's still in a solid spot. RJ Barrett also priced pretty appropriately, but I think he still has upside here. So as long as ownership stays pretty low, I want to be at least around field weight, if not expanding upon that. Josh Hart has actually been semi-productive as of lately, so he's more viable than he was. I think Mitchell Robinson's the guy, kind of like, even if Brunson by some miracle ends up playing, will be a leverage play for me. Once again, another center play, which is just making it tough for some of these other value centers that I'm just not as high on. But Mitchell Robinson's another one of those guys that I like a lot tonight. So yeah, I like the Knicks. I feel like I haven't said that since some of the earlier games, but yeah, I like the Knicks tonight, and I like them even more, assuming Brunson doesn't play tonight. So I think all these guys are in a solid spot. Mitchell's out. Don't tell me this. It's always as soon as I'm like, oh yeah, I really like this guy. Oh, Donovan Mitchell's out. I thought you meant Mitchell Robinson. Okay, yeah, Donovan Mitchell's out. That just means the Cavs are even more fun to play. I already like that team a lot. Hopefully that makes the spread a little bit closer, but honestly, I don't even know if that's the case. But man, I already mentioned freaking every Cleveland Cav on the team that I liked, and I still like them all, but even more now. Garland and Rubio were already in play. They're even better plays now. Thank you for letting me know that, Zola. Appreciate you. That's wild. This slate's gonna be a fun one. So yeah, Brunson, as long as he doesn't play, I like the Knicks a lot tonight too, though. So another good team environment. Moving over to Portland, another game with potentially really big injury news. Damian Lillard is listed as questionable, and Jerami Grant is also listed as questionable. I don't think I have to break this down too much for everyone, but Simons, Nurkic, Reddish, and Thibault would become close to really, really strong and probably chalky plays if Grant and or Lillard end up being ruled out tonight. I would plan on having exposure to all of those guys if both ended up getting ruled out. We also see a little bit of a boost for Shaedon Sharpe, and even Nasir Little a little bit too. So potential, a lot of value in these late games. I always think there's a case to be made, but it's a much harder case to be made now with Mitchell getting ruled out and Allen ruled out in that last game. But I want some shares to the early value of the Cavs and probably the Pistons, but I don't want to forget about the Knicks and Portland value tonight either. If that's a trend and it looks like people are forgetting about the value from that last game, I will try to lean some of my lines towards the later half of those games so I can late swap some of those options. But anyway, that's probably getting a little too into the weeds, but I look forward to seeing everyone later today on the NBA pre-lock show. It's going to be a good one. We already have some crazy news breaking, so hopefully we get even more to really spice things up. But appreciate you all for sticking around and look forward to seeing y'all later. Have a good one. Peace out.